Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University of Oxford Virtual Open Days. We're going to start off this morning with a session that is a Q&A specifically for families and supporters of potential Oxford applicants. And I am joined this morning by Mary Marshall and Charlotte Ellis, who will, I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. And hopefully together we're going to be talking through some issues around the application process and questions you might have, and particularly how you might be able to best support applicants as they go through this process. We'll be taking your questions from Slido throughout the session, so please do pop your questions in the Slido bar as you think of them. And with that, I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Mary, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks, Ali. I'm Mary Marshall, and I'm Director of Undergraduate Studies at the Faculty of Theology and Religion. What that means is I'm in charge of how the faculty delivers its courses for undergraduates, and I also coordinate their admissions. I work in admissions for a couple of colleges as well.
Good. And Charlotte?
I'm Charlotte Elves. I'm the Singer Fellow in Medical Law and Ethics at Exeter College. So I teach medical law amongst other law subjects, but I've been involved with college admissions on the law side of things for several years now.
Fantastic. It'll be great to have you guys' perspective on the questions this morning. So with that, let's start off with some questions about supporting applicants. So firstly, how would you recommend that someone get started on their personal statement? What kinds of things should they include, and how can you help a student who is trying to get started on that process? Charlotte, do you want to pitch in first?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing I'd probably say is make sure that it's your own. So when you're going to look online for lots of resources, which there will be many, make sure that that's not unduly influencing what you end up writing and shaping how your personal statement goes, because it is a personal statement and it is about you. So we want to know about you quite genuinely. So then I think you need to think really about the reasons for which you want to study the course, and doing the best job that you can of making us very, very aware and clear about what those reasons are. And you might find that some of those reasons are informed by things that you studied at school, or things that you've read about beyond school, or other interests that you have, but really painting a picture very clearly for us about why you want to do that course and what's brought you to this decision is probably how you want to be approaching writing that personal statement. And also I should say, if there are factors that have affected sort of maybe during your educational school, sometimes the personal statement can be the place to mention those as well. If you think that there's information that we need to be aware of that's sort of relevant to your application, but there are also other places in the UCAS application for providing that information. So there might be a balance to be struck there.
Yeah, fantastic. And maybe we'll pick up that point on sort of other issues that you might like to include after. Mary, is there anything you'd like to add on the personal statement?
Not much. I absolutely agree with everything that Charlotte has said. I suppose some practical points is don't leave it till the last minute. You still have time. If you're applying this year, you still have time at the moment. But as families and supporters of applicants, you could be there to nudge applicants to start, because starting, I think, is the most difficult thing. You've still got time now, but don't leave it till the 13th or 14th of October. And one of the things that makes it difficult to start is often students will think, oh, I've got nothing to say, there is nothing about me. And actually, you know these applicants, there's lots about them. Have a conversation with them, get them talking about the kind of reasons that they want to study, the kind of things they've been doing. If they're happy telling you, then they can start jotting those bullet points down and turning it into a personal statement. And if you're comfortable to do it, and they're happy to let you read it, read their personal statement, and you will be a very good filter for the kind of thing that Charlotte warned us about initially, which is, have they written a statement which is actually their statement, or when you read their statement, does it sound like somebody else has written it? Also, it's very good for catching things that don't quite make sense, because a well-written personal statement should make sense. It's not It's not something that should only make sense to admissions tutors. It should be painting a picture of the student for anyone who could read it. So yes, I say start promptly, and appreciate that it's about them and how much they can put in it. And I think it's encouraging them to make that start and realize how much they have to say.
That's fantastic. And I love the bit about just chatting with them a bit and then telling them to just put it down on the page, because I think sometimes that blank page can be the most terrifying bit of the whole process. And you can't make a fantastic personal statement unless you actually put words down somewhere. So that's really great. So to pick up on something that Charlotte mentioned, she was talking about the fact that there might be some extra bits that you feel like admissions tutors should be aware of. And I just wondered if you guys could maybe say a little bit about how the teacher's reference might fit into that, and sort of useful things that can be included in a teacher's reference, and when it might be nice for applicants to ask teachers to talk about some of those unusual circumstances.
Shall I pitch in?
Yeah, go for it.
The teacher's reference is potentially very important, because what it helps us to do is to gain a whole picture and a contextualized picture of the applicant. We get a lot of information, a lot of data to help us form a picture of what a student is like or might be like and what they've achieved. But actually, we have time, we put a lot of resources into our admissions process, which means that we don't just look at grades, we don't just look at numbers. We want to be able to put an individual and their accomplishments so far and their potential into a context. And we do understand that bad things can happen to good students. And it's difficult for tutors to guess when that has happened or to infer when that has happened. But if we have information, ideally from that teacher's reference, which, if you like, is an authoritative and an independent source that tells us it might look from so-and-so's GCSE results like they didn't do very well in X, Y, or Z, but actually we need you to understand that in the context of, for example, lots of things, and let's not dwell on the terrible things that happen to students, but illness, family illness, bereavement, disruption to school. So virtually everyone who's applying this year will have suffered significant disruption to their schooling. But just because everybody is suffering some disruption doesn't mean there are not individual circumstances that have particular impacts as well. So to put that information, those raw figures and facts, into some kind of narrative, which allows us to understand what that looks like in a person, in an applicant, so that we can understand that a collection of grades might mean different things for different applicants. As I say, the ideal place for that to come out is in the teacher's reference. Both the university and UCAS supply some really good advice to teachers and careers advisors, heads of sixth form, and all these people that write references as to what they can put in their reference. And that advice is out there, and I would say do take that seriously. If you, as supporters of the applicant, think that possibly whoever is going to write the reference isn't aware of these problems, then if you're comfortable to do so, make them aware. It is not a disadvantage for tutors at Oxford to understand an applicant better. So make the teachers aware of that. If there is a problem, and if for some reason you don't feel that those mitigating circumstances are going to get across in the teacher's reference, then it is possible, as Ali has said, and as Charlotte has said, to put something in a personal statement. It is also possible, when you apply, to submit things to colleges separately. So often doctors' letters and things like that get sent to colleges. And then colleges have discretion as to how they let that inform the process. But ideally, to get at least something into that teacher's reference. If something bad has happened to a good student, let us know about it. Don't try and sweep it under the carpet, because that's not advantageous.
Absolutely. That's great. Charlotte, anything to add on that?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
Very good. Maybe I'll just ask on a related point. What support can you tell us about at Oxford for students who might have, say, autism or chronic illness or mental health difficulties? Is there support available at Oxford for students that might already know that they have some extra challenges on their plate? And would you recommend Oxford as an environment for students who have maybe some extra considerations going into this? Is there anything in particular you'd like to flag for?
Shall I pick this one up?
Yeah.
No, you can, yeah. So there is the Disability Advisory Service at Oxford, which is a very sort of broad and catch-all service that is used to dealing with a real range of problems that students might have that really span the entire spectrum. I would imagine that there's very little that the Disability Advisory Service hasn't seen when it comes to supporting students. So I think that would be a first port of call for any students with those sorts of concerns. And then also there is the college side of things as well. And colleges are able to sort of play an active role in student support plans, as are their tutors across other colleges if they're taught outside of college. So there really is quite a well thought through range of support and pretty good sort of networks between departments, the university and the colleges. And also I should say in colleges you've got your sort of welfare team as well. So there will be a specialist team within college comprised of various different members of staff and sometimes peer supporters and peer mentors from within the student body itself that exist sort of solely for the purposes of dealing with these sort of welfare type considerations and any problems that the students might have. So actually I think comparing ourselves to other universities, and I'm someone who didn't do my undergraduate degree at Oxford, the welfare provision in Oxford is pretty excellent, and you know, it's not often that we have people slip through the net, if you like, who are needing that support and don't get it, because the welfare support is pretty pervasive. Mary, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
I think only to say there is an opportunity on your UCAS form if you've got a disability or a specific learning difficulty to flag that on your UCAS form. Please do so, because we don't want to give you an interview that you can't access. So if you normally are entitled to extra time in exams, or you have things presented to you in a particular way, or you have any other conditions, then flag that up, because it's useful in making sure that we're doing things in a way that you can access them.
Absolutely, and I think that information really can only help you if you let us know at the application stage. Please don't be sort of scared off by the idea that the applicant that you're supporting will be considered sort of in a different light as far as their application goes. In case it's useful, it's about 24% of our undergraduate students who have declared a disability. So it's not a case of, you know, all students at Oxford just have everything aces and everything's easy for them. That there's quite a diverse range at Oxford, and we definitely welcome applicants to let us know, particularly so we can support them through the application process. On the note of the college support, which Charlotte, I know you mentioned as being a really useful mechanism. How would you guys recommend that applicants go about choosing a college? And in particular, is there any sort of advantage or disadvantage to choosing a particular college to apply to, or to making an open application? Mary, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll take the last bit first, and then we can move on to the fun bit. So the last part of the question is actually a relatively easy one to answer. All the colleges in Oxford abide by something called the Common Framework, but what that means is that we work very hard together to try our very best to ensure that college choice does not affect your chances of success at application. It certainly shouldn't affect your academic experience on course. So it's based on the principle that we think applicants to Oxford would rather get a place at Oxford at a college than only be considered by the college that they say they most prefer and then not get it. So that sometimes means, quite often means, and it varies by subject as to how they organise it, but it can mean that you apply with a preference for College A and you are invited to interview at College B. If that happens, that is a good thing, because what that means is that they definitely want to see you, and we are trying to place applicants for interview somewhere where they are likely to stand a good chance of being admitted. There are famous colleges and big colleges in Oxford, and students are very keen to apply to those because they've heard of them and they're beautiful. But quite often these colleges do not have the most spaces. There are, however, other colleges that are equally beautiful, perhaps not as famous, but equally fine, with lots of places on offer, and they don't receive as many applications. So there's a little bit of evening out we do. So you can apply to College A, get an interview at College B, also be interviewed by College C, and maybe receive an offer from College D. And just because you feel like you might be getting passed from pillar to post, that doesn't mean that we don't care and are not interested in you. Quite the reverse. It means that lots of tutors in Oxford have seen that applicant and are saying, that applicant is worth holding on to. Let's do the very best we can. So don't worry in terms of applications about your college choice. It should not matter in terms of your chances significantly across most subjects and most colleges.
And again, I think another statistic that might be useful, around 1/3 of applicants every year are made an offer from a college that is not the one that they originally applied to. So that's quite a common scenario, and it's something that happens, as you say, Mary, to help even things out and make sure that it's a fair game from the admissions perspective. And maybe Charlotte, then you could help us think through some of the points that a student should use to choose which college to apply to or which college they might most like.
Yeah, sure. One thing I will just add to what Mary just said was that it can vary subject to subject. So for law, for instance, now it's essentially not that you're choosing a college, but maybe you're marking at best a preference for a college. So it's worth checking your sort of departmental and subject related admissions literature, which you can always usually find on the department website, just because there might be slightly different implications for open offers versus choices versus preferences, depending on which subject you're applying for. And really, you want to know what the deal is for your particular subject. With respect to how to choose a college, I don't think there's any scientific method that you can plump for, to be honest. There's lots of things that matter to you, and you best know what those things are. So it might be that the college has a particular sort of culture within the student body that you want to be a part of. Maybe a college has a really good track record with respect to the subjects you're studying. So for instance, in law, again, to make a law specific example, maybe you're aware that there's a really strong sort of student society in law that has lots of events that you think you'd like to participate in, and that's something that really matters to you. So that might inform your preference for that college. Maybe a college says, well, actually, we're quite good at giving our students in the first year en suites for their bedrooms. Maybe that's something that really matters to you, right? Maybe you don't want to go walk too far in the morning to your lectures. So it might be a question of geography. So there are lots of different things that you know about, or as supporters and families will know that matters to the person that you're supporting making the application, and they're things that they think about. But what I'd really emphasize here is there is no bad choice, if you like. So you can't really make a mistake, I think, when it comes to choosing a college. It's almost universally true, I think, that people end up very happy where they are. And so really you've just got to sort of think about, well, in an ideal world, where do I think I'd like to be? And if I'm making a firm choice in my application, well, let's pop them down. But in the full knowledge that actually all things well, you're going to be very happy wherever it is that you go.
That's really helpful, Charlotte. Thanks. And Mary, could you maybe just say a little bit about, because we've had a question on the slide about that choosing colleges feels quite difficult right now because it's harder to go see them. And particularly if you're someone who maybe didn't go to Oxford yourself as a parent, and then you feel that you don't have that kind of expertise to lean on. What are some good resources that you can use to learn these things about the colleges?
Sure. So the umbrella to all of this is to say, I hope the impression that Charlotte and I are managing to give is that don't worry too much about it. But it's always worth being informed. So the first thing I would do, most important thing, go onto the university website, the admissions website, go on the colleges section of it. It's all very clearly marked. And there is a page called something like "Which colleges do my course?" So that's the first thing that you need to pay attention to, because not all colleges do all courses. Most colleges do a lot of courses, but for example, in a smaller subject like theology and religion, there are about 13 colleges that do that subject. So first of all, your choice can be narrowed down for you. So you might feel like you're picking from a lot, but your choice can be narrowed down to the ones that actually offer your course. That's important. I should say, if you make a mistake and apply for a college that doesn't do your course, we will just shift you to somewhere that does. So don't worry, we're not going to just throw it away. Once you've narrowed it down to that, the colleges have heaps of resources, and what's happening today is a great example. If you are at this virtual open day, then you are virtually visiting colleges. And I know it's not the same. I know it's not the same as actually coming to Oxford in person and looking round, but go onto those virtual open day college websites to begin with, and you will find video resources and other materials. There'll be information provided by the academics at the college staff, the college students, that will tell you about what it's like. You'll see images of the buildings, of accommodation. You'll see the maps, which is important if you're interested in commuting distances. So the virtual open day website is a great place to start, and from there you will actually be able to link to the main college websites, which will have even more. And as we know, anyone on the internet, it's a bit of an information overload, but what you will get is access to a lot of information, and within that I would look at the things that are going to be interesting to you. So it will be possible to access information on accommodation, location. You'll see some images of the place. What you're doing now in attending the virtual open day is a brilliant place to start. It's all online for you. Online is not the same, but it's a good proxy. It's a good place to start. So have a look at what's available there for you online. If you think that you have a question and it's not been answered, then there will also be contacts flagged there. And I think it's another universal truth of Oxford University that no college, no tutor, no college office is ever sorry to hear from a potential applicant. So even though you might think no one wants to get another phone call, no one wants to get another email, that might be true in a lot of cases, but when that email is from an applicant saying, I would like to apply and I would like to know this, we are always happy to get those. So again, encourage the person you're supporting to actually ask for the information they want, because somebody will be able to give it to them. And they might even improve next year's website because it'll go up on there.
And so that's really useful, and definitely I would recommend the other events today as well. There will be a lot on, and if you as supporters can't attend, then hopefully your applicant that you are supporting will be able to find some information out for themselves. So with that, I'd like to move to some questions about interviews. Firstly, a really straightforward one. We've had a question about how the interviews will be taking place this year. Charlotte, is that something you can answer for us?
Yeah, so the interviews will be as they have been for the last year, online for the most part. Now, speaking entirely for myself and anecdotally from my experience, it is different, but in some ways I don't think it's any disadvantage to students. And in some ways, I think some students may well have benefited from the online format, certainly because whilst we don't mean to be intimidating, I think sometimes the context and the situation is, and actually we do away with all of the things that maybe sometimes are intimidating, you know, having to stay away from home, having to, you know, step into fellows' rooms and sit down and make yourself comfortable. All of those sort of collateral bits around interviewing was actually done away with, if you like, last year when it was on Teams. And actually Teams was a sort of format that people are used to and has been replicated now. So it's the same way that many people are receiving schooling. So in some ways, I think it had that benefit. And so it's certainly online interviews isn't anything that students need to be worried about. We found that sort of our, you know, if problems arise, if you lose internet connection or there's a problem, there was nothing that wasn't salvageable. Okay, we just stop the interview where we are, usually pick up a phone, ring someone and just pick up from where we left off at that time if the internet's good enough, or put it in for later in the day. So there's going to be nothing in terms of what feels like sort of technological catastrophes that's going to be any barrier or problem to interviews, okay, because we're very good at smoothing those things out and making sure that they don't really affect your performance in the interview. And some interviews will have sort of bits of text that they want you to read before you go in, that we'll be talking about in the interview, because we're asking you to analyze something, or maybe there'll be some sort of question prompts that you'll be given. And when the interviews are online, what we essentially do is they'll be emailed to you, for instance, half an hour prior to your interview. So they'll still be made available to you in advance of the interview, in much the same way they would have been had you been in college. Mary, I don't know.
And yeah, no, that's great. I think that sort of format question is a sticky one for a lot of people. But as you say, hopefully the as strange as the online version might have been at one point, hopefully that's actually starting to feel a bit more familiar to students, and that it means they can sit down in a place that feels comfortable to them, and make sure they've got you know, their water within reach and all those things that maybe can actually be of a benefit to students. Mary, would you like to maybe give some suggestions about maybe how supporters could help an applicant prepare for an interview?
Sure. So at its heart, an interview is a conversation, right? So there's a lot of mystique and glamour around Oxford interviews, and people write plays about them, and it gathers all this sort of myth around it. But actually, for the people that do them, they're not mysterious, they're not glamorous or magical in any way. It is a conversation. It's a conversation between a tutor who's dedicated a significant portion of their life to studying a subject and teaching students that subject, and an applicant who is saying, do you know what, I want to dedicate at least 3 years of my life to doing that as well. So what can we do to support applicants to feel comfortable in that conversation? You can have a conversation with the person you're supporting. So the idea is to get students, the biggest advantage that a student can get to prepare for interviews is not trying to second guess what questions will be, not inventing for themselves lists of bizarre questions that they then try to answer, but it's just feeling comfortable listening to somebody and speaking to them. And especially, I think, where families and supporters might come in, as well as friends, and of course I think they should be speaking to their peers as well, is a lot of our applicants, not all applicants, and not everyone that's being supported here might be a 17, 18-year-old, but many of them will be. 17, 18-year-olds are often more nervous speaking to grown-ups. So can they get used to having a conversation with a grown-up, albeit a friendly grown-up, about the thing that they are interested in? And it doesn't matter whether you know anything about what they want to study. In fact, in some ways, that's even better, because if they're doing maths and they're applying for maths and you last did maths when you were 15 years old and you didn't like it then that means that in order to have a successful conversation with you, they're going to have to think very carefully about how they're communicating their ideas to you. They're going to have to try and make themselves understood to somebody who's not an expert. And that's a big challenge as well. So it's having that conversation. What are they working on at the moment? What are they interested in? Why are they applying? What are they looking forward to about the course? Can they make themselves understood to you? When you ask them questions, are they listening to you? Are they comfortable talking? Because and this is not to say that we want students who are polished and eloquent and it's like sitting down and watching Newsnight or something like that. We're expecting students to have genuine conversations where people pause. No, actually, I didn't mean that. Let me start again. That's all fine, because that's a conversation. But probably the biggest thing that can go wrong in an interview, if I can put it like that, is when a student, especially on Teams, sort of shrinks back from the camera and just won't answer questions at all because they're so uncomfortable with talking and listening, and the context is intimidating to them. And we do our best to make it not intimidating. We do our very, very best to make it comfortable and to make it accessible. But if they're used to chatting to you, and if they're used to chatting to their teachers, and they're used to chatting to their friends, then that's a great preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that focus on not sort of practicing a specific answer, but just thinking about getting practice having conversations. And I like as well the point about maybe trying to chat with a grown-up who might be not as familiar as a parent or someone you know really well, to kind of replicate that experience. I think a lot of people think they need to do some sort of really fancy mock interview or something to be properly prepared, but that maybe you could even sort of set up a Zoom or a Teams call with a parent's friend or a teacher or someone, and just have that conversation. And that's really close to what the experience will be like as well, and really good for making you think through how you can articulate yourself to a person on the screen. And Mary, you kind of mentioned with the shrinking back or the mumbling or the not being willing to just kind of speak directly and speak your mind, even if you're unsure of your answers. But Charlotte, I wonder if there are anything else. We've had a question about sort of common mistakes that you might see from applicants in interview, or the pitfalls that applicants can maybe avoid.
Okay, well, that second question is sort of anticipated a particular direction I wanted to go in now, which is to say that one thing that I think really lets applicants down, and I think it happens because of advice that's been received, is, and this is particularly in law, which is the subject that I see people for, is when people are told, whatever you say, you have to stick to your guns and don't let anybody talk you down from it. Okay, what the Oxford tutors want to see is you be able to defend your argument or your point, come what may. Okay, I can guarantee you that is not what we want to see, because oftentimes it means that actually, if you're arguing something, come what may, you're probably arguing something to the point of absurdity. Okay, and in doing that, applicants do themselves a real sort of injustice. Okay, because I think there is this impulse to keep going because that's what people are told, then we want to see. Mary talked about the idea that the interview is a conversation, and if you take that as your sort of template, well, clearly, conversations don't happen by people railroading off in one direction and never coming back, despite what all the other participants in the conversation are saying or doing. It is a real strength if, when you're pushed on your position and you think, actually, this is sort of leading to some really difficult or strange conclusions that are quite problematic and actually that I don't agree with. Now that the interviewer has said, well, is that true in this situation? Do you still want to push the point that you're making? You think, actually, no, I don't. It's absolutely fine and probably in most situations correct to do that. And the way you do that, right, is by saying, actually, I've realised that the position that I was pursuing is now sort of untenable, and these are the reasons for which I think I can no longer pursue that line of argument, so maybe it's this way. Okay, so in the conversation, if you're giving the tutor the reasons for which you've now decided maybe that direction wasn't the best to go down, that's what you want to be doing. Okay, but if I could impress anything on anybody, I think when it comes to admissions, it is this idea that we don't want to see people just sort of single-handedly defending one position and staying there. Okay, because actually that doesn't tell us much about you, apart from maybe, you know, you're arguing by force of will rather than through reason. Okay, so do feel entirely able to adapt what you're saying and change what you're saying, as long as all the while that you're doing that, you're giving the reasons for the sort of direction of travel. So that would be the biggest tip I could give, I think.
That's really helpful. Yeah, that's great advice. It is amazing how many preconceptions are out there of the Oxford interview, whether you're someone who maybe attended Oxford yourself and then have ideas from those days, or someone who's completely new to the process. But yeah, it really is just a conversation where we're chatting with students about subjects they love. So hopefully it won't be too painful in the end. I've had a bit of a tricky question about applications. So do applicants have a better chance of getting in if they apply for a joint honors degree rather than just one of the subjects that they're considering combining? And do you have any advice on how to sort of manage that?
Well, I don't
Mary,
think,
is that?
Sorry, yeah, I don't think it's as straightforward as joint schools, as we call them, joint degrees versus single schools, one subject, because that varies by subject. So, for example, PPE, Politics, Philosophy and Economics, is a very big course within the university, but it is a joint school course. It combines politics, philosophy and economics. Whereas, for example, theology and religion, my own course, so I'll pick on it because I can, it's much, much smaller than PPE, but despite its double-barrel name, it is in fact a single school degree. So actually, and of course, when you're looking at chances of success, and there are different ways to look at this, raw numbers would say that the number of applicants divided by the number of places gives you, all things being equal, your chances of success. Now, all things are not equal because of course, applicants are different and some applicants are stronger than other applicants. So if you are a strong applicant, then your chance is better anyway. But if we're talking just numbers, then you will in fact find that the numbers of applicants per places varies by course. And it's not necessarily the case that there are more places available on joint school courses. Some joint school courses are very, very big, like PPE. Some of them are rather small, like archaeology, anthropology. So those figures, the applicants per place, you can find those on the online prospectus. We supply those. But at the same time, I would say, do not fixate on those. Your chances of success are not a roll of the dice. They're not determined by the number of applicants divided by the number of places. All things are not equal. You are assessed on your merits in your context, or an applicant is assessed on merit in context, and a strong applicant is a strong applicant with a strong chance of success, and you should apply to the course that, or the applicant should apply to the course that they want to study and that they are motivated to study, and that is the best way of boosting their chances of success, because you are far more likely to perform well on a course, or indeed in an interview, in something you really want to study. So don't look at those figures and think, well, I really wanted to do English, but there's a lot of people applying for that. So actually, I think I'll apply for something different that I didn't want to do. That is not the way to think about it. In fact, the most important decision that you make in this whole process isn't even to do with Oxford. It's nothing to do with which university you go to. Fundamentally, wherever you go to university, whatever application you're making on UCAS, you have to apply for a course you actually want to do. So if you actually want to do a joint school course, then apply to the joint school course. If you don't, apply to the one you do want to apply to. That's how you choose between the courses. There's no other factor that should come into it.
Absolutely. I think there's a really common feel from a lot of supporters that I've come across where it's this idea that if we can just figure out the trick or the one thing that we can do to kind of game the system, and whether that's course choice or college choice, or how to pull out the stops at the interview and do that one thing that just the right handshake that's going to suddenly make you get in, when actually we've put a lot of work into making sure that the application process is not something that can be tricked or gamed, and that it really genuinely comes down to each individual applicant and their love for their subject and how they will do if they come to Oxford, and if they will be able to really succeed and thrive at Oxford. I've had another question about the particular circumstances this year in lockdown. And the question is specifically about that there's concern that teachers simply won't know their students as well when they're coming to write a UCAS reference, and that maybe that will be less helpful. And maybe in addition to that particular point, if we could pick up some broader things about how will we be able to take into account some of the strange circumstances that might have happened this year throughout the admissions process, and what that might look like. Charlotte, would you like to lead us off on that one?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a really, really, really good question. One, I guess, benefit, if you like, of the pandemic is that at least we've all lived through it. Okay, so everybody's aware of the difficulties that people have experienced, and that's that you're surprisingly admissions tutors are human too. Okay, so they've really had their feet on the ground while the pandemic's been going on, and are incredibly aware of the impacts that that's had on people in different ways. Okay, whether it's because we see our own students as undergraduates and how they've been affected and how it's affected our teaching, whether it's because they've got children themselves, right, and they understand how their schooling has been interrupted, and because of all the information that we have access to. So it will be, I would think, at the forefront of most people's minds when they are assessing people's applications and trying to understand and contextualize the picture of the student that they have in front of them. And I think that we'll be really alive to that when we're reading teachers' references as well, okay? Because we know what teacher references normally look like. We know the sort of picture that they usually paint, and I think we might all be expecting that picture will be slightly different because it will have been painted through the lens of virtual teaching, okay? And we'll be acutely aware of that. So I would really encourage no one to be sort of unduly concerned or worried about the fact that this is going to cause big disadvantages that we don't recognize and respond to, because it won't. We're good at picking up those effects and thinking about how we take account of them in our sort of deliberation process. So none of it's going to be we're not ignorant to it, we won't miss it, and it will be picked up, and it will very much be a part of the thinking that we do when we're going through the admissions process.
That's great. And I think we've probably got time for just one last question. So related to that, the question is about advice for how a supporter can encourage a student who's maybe had a really tough time this year and is maybe feeling a bit disillusioned, maybe a bit down on themselves and where their potential is, but where the supporter is really feeling like Oxford would be a great choice, or that they can do great things. How would you suggest that a supporter can help encourage a potential applicant out of the challenges of this year? Mary, do you have any thoughts?
That's a really good question, and it's perhaps the most difficult question that we've had today, because I think it applies in so many different ways, doesn't it? I always say, and this applies any year, if you don't apply, you won't get in. So you don't, I was going to say you don't lose anything from having a go. Of course, there's a restriction on how many institutions you can apply to, but it's one chance. So if there's might succeed, you won't succeed unless you try. So I think that's something to impress on applicants. They've got other institutions to apply to. This isn't one shot and then they've lost everything. So they should apply. But within the context of this year, I think it's worth reminding students of the sorts of things that we've been saying, which are, we look for academic excellence, but we don't look for academic perfection. So no one is perfect, and we don't expect people to be absolutely flawless. So quite often, as with all human beings, I think potential applicants look at their record and look at what they can do and look at what they're expecting to do, and they see the flaws. They see, oh, I got a B in this GCSE, or I thought I was going to get a higher mark in this module, or I'd expected to do these A levels when in fact the way it's worked out is I've had to do these A levels. And they see the things that in their perception have gone wrong. What we can help them do, or they see, quite understandably, I have missed this many weeks of school, or I didn't get to sit my exams, or my teacher wasn't available and I had a cover teacher for this time, and they see the problems. What they can struggle to see is, yeah, so you got a C in this, but look how many A's you got here, and you're meeting the entry requirement, which is anything from 3 A's upwards, depending on what course students are applying for, and equivalent for IB, Scottish Highers, international qualifications, all sorts. It's all on the website. So if we can help students to see not all the things they could have done better. I look at the last 18 months and I see all the things I could have done better. And it's hard to see the things that I actually did well. If we can help students to see all the things that they did well, and we can also help students to see that actually, as we all hope, maybe 2022, 2023 will be happier years for most of the population and could be good years for them, and to try and maybe to foster some of this, nurture some of the interest that they do have in their subject. What can they read? What podcasts can they listen to? What museums or virtual museums? The British Museum has gone virtual, it's great. What can they do to realise that they are interesting people with interests? Charlotte, I don't know whether you've got anything that can help with this one.
Yeah, I mean, Mary said earlier, we're always happy to speak to people, right? So it may also be connecting with people in Oxford, okay, to have those conversations that actually are capable of sort of reigniting that spark that maybe the pandemic has, jaded a little bit. Okay, so if it's a case of actually people need to sort of rediscover the motivation that they've lost, and maybe having conversations with people about, well, what it's like, what do you want to get out of Oxford, what would it like to be here, and if that is the case, people are happy to have those conversations and to introduce sort of a new perspective, if you like. So that might also be a resource to draw on in that context. And certainly with respect to law, I mean, I'm always happy to have those conversations with potential applicants. So that might be another sort of route to reinvigorating people's enthusiasm for sort of the university application season. Fantastic.
I think, yeah, a little bit of positivity can go a long way. Just because it's a hard year doesn't mean there isn't still a lot of excellence out there and a lot of potential too. And that's ultimately what we're looking for. So with that, we have reached the end of our time. So thank you, Mary, and thank you, Charlotte, very much for all of your fantastic and well thought through answers. And I would encourage any supporters on the call today to attend some of the other sessions going on, whether it's with departments, with colleges, and get your applicant to tune into those as well, because there's a lot of really great information out there today. So hopefully we've made a good start on answering some of your questions and made this feel like a bit less of a scary process. So thank you very much for your help, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.